Welcome, Jill.
Thank
So
you.
nice to meet you because we haven't really met. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and I'm so grateful to you coming on the channel to share your mother of son wisdom without really knowing me.
Nice
But we
to
do
meet
have
you too.
mother of son hearts. You're very welcome. So but if you'd say your name, I think I already said your name, and then the state that you're calling in from.
Yeah, my name is Jill and I'm from California.
Okay. And the ages of your sons.
I have two sons, ages 14 and 16.
Okay, great. So I'm going to show you this visual and then a quote, and I want you just to feel what that experience is for you, and just trust whatever comes through you. Okay, I'll be good. So here's the visual. Can you see that?
Yep.
And what it says below?
No, could you read what it says?
Sure. So this little boy has grown donkey ears and a donkey tail, and it's saying, the one mother is saying, your father was a jackass or is a jackass.
Hmm.
So the quote is, what our sons feel and hear from our mothers, from us, contributes to the man that they will become. I'll say it again in a minute, but my visual about it when I saw it was just like this boy who adores his mom, because most do, and looks up to her, and whatever her feeling about men is, it's like, whoa, am I supposed to be that or not that, or so what our sons hear and feel from us, meaning gestures, not just words, the ideas that we hold about men and maleness in general, contributes to the man they will become. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I agree with your interpretation there. I think what we say to our sons and how we act around them does affect them a lot. I will say my parents were divorced when I was little, and it was a hard divorce with my mom, and yet she never said anything bad about my dad. And that enabled me to still have a relationship with him, right? And learn on my own what he was like, which I think is important. I know a lot of times when people have a rough relationship, whether they get divorced or not always, but a lot of people will say bad things about the person they're having trouble with. And I think that's really damaging to the kids, because honestly, no matter what's going on between the two parents, or what I think is really important is that most of the time, both of them really love the kids, right? So even though it's a little bit tangential, I think for me, because of that, I really wouldn't say bad things to my kids, about guys. Now I'm lucky. My husband is wonderful. He's kind of the opposite from my dad. He's very calm. He's an engineer. So he's almost a stereotypical engineer. Sometimes he might not be the best at expressing his feels in the emotional side, but if I ask him, he will say, well, of course, I love you, or I think you're pretty, or you're smart, or whatever it is. And he's always very supportive. So I think seeing that does have a good influence. And you don't have to be married to have the good influence of good men in your son's lives. Just for me, that's how that's worked out. So I guess the non-judgment part, like I don't judge and think that you have to have a two-parent family. I don't think that you have to be together. I don't think any of that is what's really important. I think what's important is putting the care into your kids and just having good role models one way or another.
Thank you. Very clear. If I may, so I love when you said that you were allowed the opportunity to know your father in your own way. Very interesting. Is there any way in this, traveling from being a daughter and into motherhood and being a mother of son, where you had relationships with other men outside of your father that imprinted or influenced you. And you had to be aware or maybe not aware of how you felt about that. It could be unhealed situations, I don't know, or you healed them, any kind of history like that that you might have that you like to lend to this lens as well.
Yeah, so my dad left when I was 4, and my mom started dating my stepdad when I was about 5. They didn't get married until I was 7. And honestly, my stepdad had not ever wanted to get married or have kids. He was the oldest of 8 kids and had to spend a lot of time raising his brothers and sisters. But he and I bonded like right away. So I was lucky, even though I had the divorce and things like that to deal with. I also had a good example of a good dad, and he and I are super close. But there was still, drama. I would see my dad on the weekends, and he had various different girlfriends. And I remember, because when you're a kid, you just think however your situation is normal. I remember saying to some of my friends, "Oh, I hung out with my dad and his girlfriend." And with them coming from families that were still together, they were like, "Oh my gosh," And then I had to explain, no, my parents are divorced. It's okay that he has girlfriends. It's not like some side thing. So that definitely had, an influence. And then,
In what way, if you don't mind elaborating a little more, what was the influence for you? What you were seeing, what you were feeling, what you were being influenced?
I guess my mom and my stepdad were, fairly strict, but they were also very involved. They were the ones who would help me with my homework. I had some typical divorce issues, where in my own not super rebellious way, I was acting out. I was smart, so I was getting in trouble in school mainly for talking too much, right? Because I'm very talkative, but it was because I was bored. So my my parents had to decide, well, were they going to put me in private school, or were they going to move to a better school district, and then have me in public school, which is what they did. But that meant that they couldn't afford a house. So we lived in apartments all growing up, right? And then I was behind in school. And so my mom helped me with catching up on reading, and my stepdad helped me catch up on math. And they both spent time to go through this with me. And it turns out that I really love math. And so we kept working ahead even after I caught up. So we did negative numbers, and then we did square roots, and then we got up as far as he could go. And this was like 1st and 2nd grade. So by the end of 2nd grade, he'd gotten me up to calculus, and then he didn't know calculus, so we had to stop, right? Contrast with my dad, who is a doctor, who, I'd only see him once a week, but he wouldn't want to deal with me if I was sick. And so like one time when I was sick, he came to pick me up. And then I guess we were driving back to his place, and he realized I was sick. So he took me back, and he told me he was taking me back because I'd been bad. Right. So you had people, who would go out of their way to do whatever to help me out. And my own dad, who didn't even want to be around me when I was sick. And as a kid, I thought I was being bad. Right. So, so that contrast was pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm. Both of those situations made you who you are today.
Yep.
Yeah. And the who you are today, if you'll share some about your journey to mother of your 2 sons, who's the place they are today.
Yep. So like I always did want to get married and have kids, but it took me a really long time. And I graduated, I was a math major, and then I had a hard time finding a job. So I went to law school, and became an attorney. But if you don't end up meeting someone in school, a lot of times that will push back, when you get married. And finding a job, I had grown up in LA my whole life. My first attorney job was actually for the Nevada legislature in Carson City, which was very small. And so then I was definitely, like over 30 and dating people. And I had guys ask, well, what's wrong with you? Why even get married? I even had a couple guys say, okay, so you haven't been married and you don't have kids. And I said, no, thinking that was a good thing. And they're like, oh, like that was somehow bad. Like if I had been, worth their time, I would have already had someone, like I would have been divorced, and that would have been the only reason I was single. Right. So it took me a long time. And then I dated a guy from law school who had broken up with me, and we were starting to date again. And I didn't realize he was bipolar, and he was drinking, and he ended up killing himself on my birthday. So I kind of went through a lot of different things. And then it wasn't too long after that I met Doug, and we dated. But like I said, he isn't super expressive. So I guess from when we started dating, he right off figured, okay, well, this is the person that I'm going to end up marrying someday. But he didn't share that with me, right? Even at some point after a year or so, I was like, well, do you love me? And he was like, well, yeah, of course I do. Like in his mind, it was totally obvious that he did. So it was an adjustment to that. But then we did get married. And so by the time we got married, I was 35. But we waited a year before we started trying to have kids. And then I got pregnant pretty quickly and had my first child at 36, right? And so I think all those experiences, not just with my parents, but being a little more settled and all that, did affect how I had kids. I wasn't, worried that I wouldn't be ready. I was ready. I'd always known I wanted kids. It wasn't, I never felt like I had to sacrifice anything. I felt really lucky.
How'd you feel when you heard you had a boy or had a boy?
I just wanted a healthy child, honestly. I didn't really care. In a way, I figured it was probably good for me to have, like, once I found out I was a boy, I'm like, well, I always liked math and science. I did a lot of sports. I was kind of a tomboy. I figure, okay, if anyone's going to be fine with boys, this will be no problem. And it is interesting when they were little, like I was the one who would roughhouse around with them more than my husband, because I really am tomboyish, and I did a ton of sports, and I would never minded competing with the guys. It was always more fun for me to compete with the guys. So and it is interesting too when my kids are little. Like, so when I was little, I was good at math, and I had people say things like, well, guys are better than girls at math. And what they should have said was, statistically, more guys are good at math than girls, but they didn't say that. So I was like, no, they're not. I'm going to be better than every single one of these boys in math, right? And then when my sons were in school, there was a lot of the encouragement of trying to get women and girls into STEM. And so in class, they were hearing, oh, girls can be good at math, girls can be good at science. And they took that almost to be like, oh, of course, girls are better at math and science than we are. And so I had to say, there's just all these like years and years and years where girls were told they couldn't do this, or that guys would automatically be better. But that doesn't mean you can't also be good at it. And so that it is interesting. And so they very much feel like girls can be just as good, if not better than they are in pretty much anything. And I think that does affect that they have a lot of respect for girls. I think girls are amazing, right? They're very sweet and kind, and they have no problem if girls are better at things than they are,
That's interesting. And I'm tracking back to your stepfather, your original math inspiration, if you will, that's come and you've landed here with the confidence and then can lend it to them with a change of attitude.
Yes.
With girls and boys in math and science. Wow. Thank you. Just wondering if there's anything else when you just picture.
I guess the other thing is I did also teach them how to cook. I figured, okay, since I got boys, what would be good if they want to date someday? So, I thought they would never be good at cleaning because my husband is abominable. So at one point early on, I was like the only neat one, and then our whole house was a disaster, which happens a little bit, I think, anytime you have kids, unless you're very strict about it or have a nanny or something. But our house got really messy. But I thought, okay, at least I can teach them how to cook. So I let them help me cook. And they had these little cooking kits where you could try different recipes that we would do for kids. So they already have some kitchen supplies for when they are on their own. And then around 14, each of them decided they wanted to totally neatly organize their rooms, and they asked me to help. And now they're actually also neat. So don't give up hope. It can happen at some point.
Keep modeling.
And so I think between their, having respect for girls, right? But also like being neat and knowing how to cook, I think at some point they'll be good partners.
Mm-hmm. And that's been intentional. It feels like hearing you.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're generally just really nice guys, and that's them, right? That's their personality. And even just the other day, they had tried out for the tennis team. They didn't make it, so they're doing track. But I ran into a mom who'd helped with the tryouts, and I said, "Oh, they didn't make it. They actually were less sad than I was about it." And she said, "Oh, you have a freshman and a junior, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, I remember them. They were so sweet. It really broke our heart to have to cut them." So it was nice to have just a random person say how sweet they are.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
But that's
thank you so
them. I
much.
mean,
Yeah.
that's their personality, right?
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
me. They are the ones who are nice.
Yeah, they came here to be nice. Nice. So, you've teared up, it seems, a couple of times during our conversation. I'm just wondering what's Tinder for you, if you're open.
I don't know. I mean, I still have some unresolved things with my dad, but I'm glad that I feel like since my husband is so different, that they won't have a lot of the same emotional, hard times that I had, which I'm happy about. That's what you want.
Right. So you are sensitive to and aware that the boys are watching other men. They're watching you too, of course, right? Other men on how to be men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, that's the lineage of the ideas about men and maleness that we started this conversation with. You get these ideas from mom or the environment or the men around you, and they start to become who you are and then how you act. And that's the mindfulness piece of one of the reasons why we're doing this is to be aware of it. So appreciate you sharing the tender place that can be healed. It sounds like it wants to be healed. Beautiful. I am so grateful to our time together. Do you have anything else that you want to say?
No, I'm good.
No, thank you so much.